For as long as we have drawn maps, we have wondered what lies beneath them. Beneath the stone, the ice, the noise of the surface stories whisper of another world, hidden and alive. A world called Agartha. Ancient texts describe it as a vast civilization beneath the Earth's crust, cities of light powered by a hidden sun, ruled by a timeless order that watches the surface from below. Explorers claim to find its gateways in the Himalayas, the poles, and the deserts of South America. Monks spoke of voices in the rock, sailors of warm winds rising from the ice. Scientists recorded strange hums the planet never stops making. Whether myth, map, or memory, Agartha has always remained the same, a reflection of everything the surface has forgotten: wisdom, silence, and balance. Tonight, we follow that hum and descend into the world beneath the world. The hollow beginning. In the late 19th century, explorers began to speak of maps that showed something beneath the continents. They were not maps in the usual sense, no rivers or coastlines, but circles within circles, labelled with names that did not belong to any known language. One of these maps, said to have been drawn in Tibet, bore a single word written in English: Agartha. The name appeared again in the writings of a French mystic, Saint-Yves d'Alvedre, in 1886. He claimed to have received knowledge of a hidden world inside the earth, where an ancient civilization continued to thrive, untouched by surface time. He described it as a kingdom of wisdom, governed by spiritual laws rather than human power, and connected to the outer world through secret tunnels that crossed under Asia and the poles. The idea was not entirely new. Long before Saint-Yves, older myths spoke of entrances to other realms beneath the mountain. In Hindu texts, there is mention of Patala, a subterranean world inhabited by serpent beings known as Nagas. The Tibetan Shambhala was said to exist beyond ordinary geography, a kingdom of perfect harmony, hidden from the eyes of the unready. In the north, Norse legends told of Svartalfheima, the realm of the dark elves, deep within the earth's rock. Even in Christian Europe, hollow spaces beneath mountains carried mystery: the catacombs of Rome, the caverns of Cappadocia, the endless mines of Bohemia. The earth, it seemed, was imagined as a layered being, its surface only a shell. In 1906, a Norwegian sailor named Olaf Jansen claimed to have sailed into the earth itself. His story, later published as The Smoky God, described a voyage beyond the Arctic Circle, where the sea turned strangely warm and luminous fogs rose from the water. Jansen said he passed through a polar opening and found himself in a vast interior world, illuminated by a central sun suspended in the hollow core of the planet. There, he claimed, lived a race of giant humans 12 feet tall, peaceful and advanced, their cities filled with magnetic power and crystal light. He called their land Agartha. When he returned to the surface, his account was dismissed as delusion, yet his manuscript circulated quietly among those who already suspected the earth was not what it seemed. By the early 20th century, the idea of a hollow world attracted scientists and mystics alike. In 1913, Marshall B. Gardner published A Journey to the Earth's Interior, suggesting that explorers had misinterpreted the poles entirely. He argued that the polar regions were not the ends of the Earth, but openings. He drew diagrams showing sunlight bending into these vast holes, explaining the strange optical effects reported by Arctic expeditions, the shimmering horizons, the warm winds, and the migrating animals that seemed to disappear northward. Gardner claimed the planet's crust was 800 miles thick, and that within it lay another world with its own seas, continents, and atmosphere. At the same time, occult societies in Europe began to link Agartha with lost civilizations. The Theosophical Society, founded by Helena Blavatsky, spoke of hidden masters, spiritual beings who guided humanity from secret places beneath the Himalayas. In her 1888 work, The Secret Doctrine, Blavatsky described ancient races that predated human memory. some said to have retreated underground after great cataclysms. Her followers believed Agartha was their refuge. By the 1932, German and Russian expeditions sought physical entrances in Tibet and the Arctic, convinced that surviving traces of these elder cultures could still be found. In the East, the story took a different tone. Tibetan monks spoke of Agartha not as a physical place, but as a vibration, an inner world accessible through the mind. In their teaching, the earth's heart was alive and conscious, and certain people could reach it through meditation. The Kalachakra Tantra, a sacred Buddhist text, described a hidden realm known as Shambhala that would one day reveal itself when the world entered its darkest age. It would not be found by maps, but by transformation of the seeker. Western explorers who heard these teachings often misunderstood them, turning metaphors into geography. Yet, even in misunderstanding, the myth grew stronger. During World War II, a rumor spread that the German military had discovered passages beneath Antarctica. In 1947, American Rear Admiral Richard E. Byrd led Operation High Jump, a massive Antarctic expedition with over 4,000 men, ships, and aircraft. Officially, it was for training and mapping. But in later accounts, Byrd was quoted as saying he had seen green valleys and warm lakes deep within the polar ice, and that his aircraft had flown beyond the pole into a land unknown. Some believed his words referred to an entrance to the inner world. Others thought they were misunderstood fragments from his private diary. The diary itself has never been verified, but it continues to circulate, its pages filled with quiet observations of a luminous horizon and strange craft that moved without sound. The myth of Agartha endured because it fit a pattern older than science, the belief that knowledge is never truly lost, only hidden. When early explorers described vast networks of caves in Turkey, underground cities like Derinkuyu that could house tens of thousands, many saw them as evidence of an ancient culture retreating beneath the earth to survive disasters. These cities had ventilation shafts, wells, and chambers carved into volcanic rock. They were real, measurable, and silent. Their builders left no records. Some were dated to 800 BCE, others possibly older. The connection to Agartha was speculative, yet irresistible. In South America, legends of the Chincana tunnels beneath Cusco spoke of hidden paths stretching from the Temple of the Sun to distant valleys. In the Andes, the Uros people told stories of golden men who came from beneath the mountains, teaching them before vanishing again underground. In North America, the Hopi people of Arizona spoke of Sipapuni, the place of emergence, a hole in the ground from which humanity had once come after a time of darkness. The pattern was the same across cultures, an older world below, wiser and quieter than the one above. Modern science dismisses the hollow earth theory, yet the idea persists not as a fact but as a metaphor that refuses to die. Satellites have mapped the planet's crust, measured its density, and tracked seismic waves that reveal solid layers of iron and rock. But to those who follow the story of Agartha, these instruments only scan the surface. They say the entrances close when uninvited eyes approach, that the realm remains sealed until humanity remembers the silence it has forgotten. Agartha, in the calmest version of the myth, is not a city of gold or a refuge of giants, but a mirror of human longing, a world imagined beneath our feet to hold what the surface lost: wisdom, patience, and peace. It is not about proof, but about the possibility that somewhere deep within the planet, life continues without noise, untouched by time, waiting for the world above to grow quiet again. The maps beneath the poles. In 1531, a Flemish cartographer named Orontius Phineas drew a world that should not have existed. His map, found centuries later in the Library of Congress, depicted Antarctica not as a frozen wasteland, but as a continent free of ice, complete with river systems and mountain ranges. The coastlines are lined with modern surveys of the continent beneath the ice, a detail that no explorer of the 16th century could have known. The Phineas map became one of the first anomalies in the long history of the polar mystery, and later researchers would see in its curves and coastlines a quiet suggestion that someone, long before recorded history, had seen the Earth without its ice. A century later, another map appeared. It was drawn by a Turkish admiral named Piri Reis in 1513 on gazelle skin parchment. It showed the western coasts of Africa and South America with surprising accuracy, though Europe had only recently confirmed their existence. The lower section of the map, curving sharply southward, hinted again at a southern continent, its shape remarkably similar to Antarctica's landmass. Piri Reis wrote that he compiled his work from 20 older charts, including some from ancient times. He mentioned one source belonging to Alexander the Great's era. Historians later dismissed this as legend, yet the detail remained unsettling. Antarctica had not yet been discovered by modern navigation, but somehow it was already drawn. For centuries, the poles represented the limits of imagination. No one could survive their cold or cross their winds. Yet stories from early explorers repeatedly mentioned something unusual near them. The 17th century astronomer Edmund Halley, who gave his name to the comet, proposed in 1692 that Earth was hollow, containing concentric shells that rotated independently, each with its own magnetic field. He believed the aurora borealis, the northern lights, might be caused by luminous gases escaping from polar openings between these shells. His theory was accepted by some of his contemporaries, not as a myth, but as a mechanical model of planetary structure. As Arctic exploration advanced, scattered reports described warm winds, green water, and migrating birds flying north, even in winter. In 1823, British explorer Sir John Ross noted strange red snow near the poles, which later analysis revealed to contain microscopic life algae surviving where nothing else could. American whaler Captain William Scoresby observed that his compass behaved erratically near certain latitudes, swinging violently as if drawn by unseen forces beneath the ice. In his log, he wrote of a softness in the air, as though another climate lay beyond. By the 19th century, with the rise of polar expeditions, the maps grew stranger. Lieutenant Charles Wilkes of the U.S. exploring expedition reported land beneath the ice in 1840, confirming for the first time the existence of Antarctica. Yet his charts showed large gaps, blank spaces, labelled unknown, possible coast, or beyond survey. The British Admiralty maps of the 1,860 seconds still left open circular regions around both poles, areas considered inaccessible to observation. In these blank regions, theorists began to imagine vast openings, gateways to the inner world. In 1906, William Reed's book Phantom of the Poles argued that every major expedition had unknowingly passed near these entrances, but had turned back because of fog, magnetic anomalies, or shifting ice. Reed believed the Arctic's frequent warm currents were not surface phenomena, but outflows from an internal ocean. His book was filled with coordinates, ship routes, and thermal data collected from voyages spanning a century. The tone was calm, almost scientific, as though describing a simple topographical oversight. The Russian mystic Nicholas Roerich, traveling through Central Asia in the 1,920 seconds, claimed that lamas in Tibet spoke of a vast subterranean network linking the poles. According to them, the openings were not merely geographic but energetic passages that connected the outer world to Agartha's interior kingdom. Roerich's diary from 1927 mentioned a deep hum beneath the mountains, as of an invisible machinery working in sleep. When he returned to New York, he presented U.S. officials with a map showing magnetic lines running between the Himalayas and the Arctic Circle. Its origin was never explained. In 1947, Admiral Richard E. Byrd, already famous for his earlier polar flights, embarked on Operation High Jump, an American expedition to Antarctica involving more than a dozen ships and aircraft. Officially, it was a military training exercise. Unofficially, its scale was unusual for peacetime. When Byrd returned, he reportedly wrote in his private log about flying beyond the South Pole and seeing lush green valleys and creatures that seemed like ancient beasts. Later retellings expanded this into a meeting with advanced beings from the inner earth. Historians believe these accounts were later inventions, but the rumor persisted. Even now, some maps of that era show unverified lakes and oases in the middle of the Antarctic continent, places that have since vanished from official records. In 1968, satellite surveys revealed Lake Vostok, a vast freshwater body sealed beneath 2 miles of ice, stretching over 160 miles in length. Its discovery revived speculation that entire ecosystems might exist in isolation beneath the frozen crust. Russian scientists drilled into it decades later, but sealed the borehole immediately after detecting unusual microbial activity. The samples were never publicly released. In the silence that followed, the ancient maps gained new relevance, their impossible coastlines seeming less like imagination and more like memory. The notion that older civilizations might have mapped the poles before the last ice age remains controversial but quietly persistent. Geologists note that if the Antarctic ice sheet were removed, the underlying land would match several early depictions almost perfectly. This coincidence continues to trouble researchers who study historical cartography. The Piri Reis maps southern continent and Phineas's rivers still align with modern sonar imagery far too closely for comfort. Among all the maps, one detail remains consistent. The poles are never shown as points, but as circular depressions like the centers of whirlpools. To early believers, this was not artistic error, but encoded truth. They saw in it the suggestion that the Earth's geometry concealed its own entrances, that the journey inward was not across distance, but down through memory. Even now, the maps remain on display in quiet archives and digital collections. They are studied by historians, navigators, and dreamers alike. Some see only errors of early cartography. Others see records of something once known and later forgotten. Between them lies a space of silence, where imagination and evidence overlap like shadows across old parchment. In that silence, the world beneath the world waits still unmeasured, still unnamed, its lines drawn faintly beneath the poles. The voices from the inner earth. In 1945, a radio operator stationed in northern Greenland reported hearing something beneath the static. His name was Harold Wilcox, a technician trained to recognize magnetic interference, auroral noise, and atmospheric hiss. Yet this was different. Late one night, while scanning a shortwave band near 12 MHz, he recorded a slow oscillation, a rhythm too structured to be random. It repeated in cycles of 6 seconds, rising and falling like breath. Wilcox described it in his log as a low, human-like hum beneath the floor of the world. The recording was sent to Washington and never mentioned again. Years later, fragments of it resurfaced in a Norwegian research archive labeled Polar Ionospheric Activity 1945-46. The tone remains unexplained. Such reports form a quiet undercurrent in the story of Agartha. They do not claim discovery or revelation, only sound. Throughout the 20th century, from Tibet to Alaska, from the Andes to the Urals, similar descriptions appear. A subterranean hum, deep and steady, audible when wind and machinery fall silent. In 1978, residents of Bristol, England, began complaining of a constant low-frequency noise they could not escape. It became known as the Bristol hum. Sound engineers traced it to no source. In Taos, New Mexico, a similar hum was recorded by scientists from the University of New Mexico in 1992, resonating at 32 Hz. The report concluded that the phenomenon was real but untraceable. Those who study the law of Agartha saw these hums as faint signals, the earth itself speaking from within. Ancient texts mention the same. The Rig Veda, one of India's oldest scriptures, speaks of the songs of the serpent beneath the ground, describing tones that could be heard only by the pure of mind. Tibetan monks, during deep meditation, report vibrations that rise from the base of the spine like the voice of the mountain. In the mid-20th century, French author Ferdinand Ossendowski wrote Beasts, Men and Gods, recounting his travels through Mongolia during the Russian Revolution. He told of lamas who whispered about Agartha, a hidden kingdom ruled by the king of the world. They spoke of a subterranean city where bells rang without hands and light came from stones that hummed. Ossendowski's account spread widely in Europe after its publication in 1922. In it, he described a prophecy told to him by a Tibetan monk. When the surface world lost balance, the people of Agartha would send their voices through the ground, not as warning, but as memory. To some, it was myth. To others, it was documentation, a rare glimpse into the oral record of those who still believed the earth was hollow and alive. By the 1950s, advancements in seismology began revealing mysterious patterns. During nuclear tests, sensors often picked up echoes that travelled through the planet in unexpected ways, as if striking hollow chambers or cavities larger than known caves. Seismic data from 1959 showed a signal beneath the Indian Ocean that bounced differently from any known layer of rock. It was logged by the US Coast and Geodetic Survey, but never publicly analysed. Decades later, researchers at MIT revisited the data and labelled it a low-velocity anomaly, a technical phrase that explained nothing but acknowledged irregularity. In 1963, deep within the Himalayas, the British explorer Andrew Thomas wrote of hearing metallic ringing in a cavern near Lhasa. The monks guiding him stopped and placed their palms on the wall, saying softly, "It lives." Thomas later suggested that the sound was mechanical, perhaps a relic of an ancient technology still functioning beneath the mountains. His notes, preserved in the archives of the Royal Geographical Society, include sketches of smooth tunnels and symbols carved into stone. None of it was confirmed by later expeditions, though one image, a doorway cut with mathematical precision, remains widely circulated in studies of unexplained architecture. Beneath Lake Baikal in Siberia, divers in the 1982nd reported an incident that was quickly classified by the Soviet military. They claimed to have encountered beings in silver suits, roughly 3 meters tall, moving effortlessly through the freezing water. When they attempted to capture one, an explosion of bubbles forced them to the surface, injuring several. The official report mentioned hydroacoustic interference. Unofficially, it was linked to Agarthan myth, which had quietly survived in Russian folklore as the realm of the Chud, an ancient race said to have gone underground after the last glacial age. Scientists studying infrasound have suggested that the hums and tones attributed to Agartha may come from the movement of tectonic plates, ocean resonance, or even atmospheric pressure trapped in caves. Yet none of these theories fully explain the uniform frequencies or their persistence across continents. In 2013, a global study conducted by the University of Colorado found a constant low-frequency vibration emanating from the planet itself, even in the absence of earthquakes. They called it the Earth's permanent free oscillation. It was always there, humming faintly beneath all noise, as if the world were breathing. In spiritual literature, these vibrations are not mere geology, but communication. The Sanskrit word nada refers to the cosmic sound, the inaudible hum underlying creation. Mystics claim that through deep stillness, one can hear it within. Some equate it with the same resonance that scientists record, but do not name. The Earth's low tone, the monk's hum, the engineer's static, all different perceptions of one vibration. Among modern enthusiasts of the Hollow Earth theory, recordings of these tones circulate online. They are filtered, slowed, and mapped into patterns that seem to form voices. In 1995, a supposed tape known as the Siberian Sounds from Hell appeared, claiming to capture screams from a deep borehole in the Kola Peninsula. Later, it was proven to be a hoax made from movie sound effects, but the fascination did not fade. It reminded listeners that the idea of voices beneath us touches something older than science, an instinct that the planet remembers. There are other accounts, quieter, less sensational. In 2008, geologists drilling in western Tibet recorded a sustained tone at 26 Hz, lasting several minutes, rising and falling in a pattern not consistent with machinery or tremors. The data was stored in seismic archives under acoustic anomaly, subsurface resonance. No explanation followed. Tibetan locals, when shown the readings, simply said, "That is the mountain's dream." Every age finds its own way to listen. In one century, it is the ear pressed against stone. In another, it is a seismograph tracing invisible pulses. Between both lies the same question: what is it that speaks, if not us? The myth of Agartha has always depended less on belief than on hearing. It is not a story of descent or discovery, but of attention, of noticing the faint hum beneath ordinary life, and wondering whether it belongs to something alive, vast, and waiting. The cities of light. In 1924, a French traveller named Alexandre Saint-Yves d'Alvedre described, in quiet certainty, the structure of an invisible empire beneath our feet. He called it Agartha, and wrote that its heart was a radiant city named Shambhala, a place not of faith, but of balance, where light had been mastered, and where sound was a tool of architecture. His account, published posthumously, spoke not of fiction, but of observation. He wrote that the cities below were lit without flame, fed without harvest, and built from a knowledge that preceded the surface sun. To many readers, it sounded like fantasy. Yet his words would ripple through the next century, resurfacing in the writings of explorers, monks, and theosophists, who all described, in different tones, a world of luminous silence beneath the mountains. In the years that followed, the name Shambhala became interchangeable with Agartha. Both referred to a hidden civilization, some said beneath Tibet, others beneath the Gobi Desert, or within the hollow of the earth itself. The earliest descriptions are consistent in one detail: the city's shine. Travellers who claim to have seen them speak of a light without shadow, neither fire nor electricity, emanating from crystals embedded in walls of smooth stone. A missionary in Mongolia, Father Pierre d'Auteux, wrote in 1912 that local elders told him of an underworld where men live in perpetual day, guided by pillars of brightness that never burn out. He called it the City of the Inner Sunday. The story matched older Hindu writings that spoke of Nagaloka, a subterranean realm illuminated by jewels upon the foreheads of serpentine beings. In Tibetan manuscripts, Agartha was said to be composed of 7 concentric cities, each representing a level of understanding. At its centre stood Shambhala, the spiritual capital. The air there was said to shimmer with an amber glow. Rivers of liquid light ran through its streets. The structures, some believed, were carved not by hand, but by sound vibration shaping matter in silence. These images, passed down through oral tradition, were never presented as allegory. To those who preserved them, they were descriptions, not symbols. In 1935, Nicholas Roerich, the Russian painter and explorer, led a scientific expedition across Central Asia under the sponsorship of the US Department of Agriculture. Officially, it was a search for drought-resistant plants. Unofficially, Roerich was searching for traces of Shambhala. His diary, now kept in the Roerich Museum in New York, records that near the Altai Mountains, his team saw a radiant oval object moving silently in the sky. The local lamas told him that such lights marked the presence of messengers from Agartha. He later painted path to Shambhala, depicting mountains glowing from within as if hollow, their peaks crowned with spheres of light. Accounts of these luminous cities also reached the West through Blavatsky's Theosophical movement. In The Secret Doctrine, 1888, she referred to an elder race dwelling within the heart of the earth, preserving the inner fire that sustains the planet. Followers of her work later speculated that the mysterious energy of Agartha might be linked to the same forces modern science was only beginning to measure: radiation, magnetism, and resonance. The idea that light could be sustained without fuel aligned strangely with discoveries of phosphorescence and piezoelectric crystals in the early 20th century. For believers, science had simply rediscovered what the ancients already knew. When early explorers reached the caves of Derinkuyu in Cappadocia, Turkey, in the 1960 seconds, they found an underground city extending 8 levels deep, connected by tunnels to other settlements miles away. It contained ventilation shafts, wells, stables, and churches, all carved from volcanic rock. Archaeologists dated it to at least the 1st millennium BCE. To those who studied Agartha, this was evidence that humanity had once lived in vast subterranean complexes, remnants perhaps of the surface colonies of the greater world below. In Peru, under the city of Cusco, legends told of golden tunnels leading from the Temple of the Sun to a hidden kingdom of light. Some explorers vanished searching for them. The tunnels were later sealed by government order after collapses claimed several lives. In the 1950 seconds, a British engineer named Harold T. Wilkins published Mysteries of Ancient South America, in which he claimed that explorers in the Andes had found inscriptions describing an inner continent illuminated by cold light. Wilkins compared the accounts to the glowing chambers of the Egyptian pyramids, where some believed traces of ancient luminescent material once existed. His suggestion was quiet, not grand, that ancient builders had known how to produce light without flame, and that Agartha might have preserved that art. In modern times, reports of underground illumination have been studied in a different context. Geologists working in the Mponeng gold mine in South Africa, more than 2 miles below the surface, discovered colonies of bacteria surviving in total darkness, feeding on radiation from uranium deposit. The microbes emit a faint blue glow under certain conditions. Scientists named one strain Desulforudis audaxviata, the bold traveller. To the rational mind, it is biology. To the mythic imagination, it is confirmation. Light can exist in darkness. Life can thrive without the sun. Descriptions of Agartha's cities share another common element: silence. Visitors describe a world where communication is done through thought, where sound itself has become unnecessary. The inhabitants, according to those who claim contact, live for centuries, their lives guided by cycles of study rather than years. Technology, if it exists, is not mechanical but harmonic. In 1947, a Chilean diplomat named Miguel Serrano published a small book, El Cordón Dorado, where he described meeting monks who spoke of an inner brotherhood beneath Antarctica, preserving archives of pre-human history. They referred to their home as the Cities of Light, plural, implying a network spanning the globe. Serrano later wrote that these places were not beneath us, but beside us, hidden in another vibration of the same earth. When viewed from above, the planet's luminous point cities, towns, electric grids form constellations of their own, mirroring the sky. Some have noted that this image echoes the ancient belief that the world within mirrors the world above. If the night sky represents the cosmic body, perhaps the glowing cities beneath the crust represent its soul. Scientists map the crust, engineers drill, historians document ruins, but the image of the luminous city endures, unchanged, silent, self-contained. The legend of the cities of light continues to live, not in discovery, but in persistence. It passes quietly through archives, diaries, and oral traditions, surviving because it answers a simple, enduring question: what if illumination did not come from the sun, but from within the earth itself, the monarch of the inner world? In 1924, during a long conversation in the Himalayan monastery of Narabanchi Kure, the Russian writer Ferdinand Ossendowski listened as a monk spoke of a being they called Rigden Djepo. The name, translated imperfectly into Russian and later into English, became the King of the World. The monk spoke slowly, describing him not as a man, but as a principle, an unseen monarch who governed the balance of the planet from a realm beneath the mountains. Ossendowski recorded the exchange in his later work Beasts, Men, and Gods. He wrote that the monk spoke with absolute calm, as if reporting a simple fact. His eyes see through stone, the monk said. His voice travels through the earth as thunder travels through air. In the mythic geography of Agartha, this monarch is not an emperor in the human sense. He does not command armies or collect wealth. Instead, he is said to oversee the harmony of civilizations, those on the surface and those below, ensuring that the two remain in balance. When human societies lose their direction, when greed or violence begins to dominate, his influence is said to wane. But when compassion, learning, and order return, the light of Agartha grows stronger. In this cosmology, history itself is a pulse. Decline on the surface means retreat within. Harmony above means emergence below. The earliest reference to such a figure appears in Sanskrit writings that speak of Manu Vaivasvata, a lawgiver who survived a great flood and guided humanity's rebirth from the mountains of the north. In Tibetan Buddhist tradition, this idea evolved into Rigden Djepo, the eternal ruler of Shambhala, a king who does not die, but simply sleeps between epochs. According to the Kalachakra Tantra, this ruler governs from a throne of radiant crystal at the center of the earth, attended by beings who have achieved perfect balance between body and mind. From this throne, the monarch perceives every vibration of the surface, every thought that shapes human destiny. Western mystics, upon hearing these accounts, translated them into their own languages of philosophy and science. Helena Blavatsky referred to this figure as the inner initiate, a consciousness that maintains planetary equilibrium. In her writings, the King of the World represents not a ruler, but a living law, a resonance that keeps creation aligned. Early theosophists suggested that this being might even be a collective intelligence, a council rather than a person. In this interpretation, Agartha becomes a vast mind, its core a consciousness so ancient that it no longer distinguishes between individual and whole. During the early 20th century, several explorers claimed to have sought communication with this hidden monarch. In 1926, Nicholas Roerich, during his Central Asian expedition, wrote in his Journal of Hearing Rumours that a message from Shambhala had reached certain monasteries in Tibet. The lamas reportedly gathered in silence as a deep tone vibrated through the stone floors. Roerich described it as a voice that seemed not to come from air, but from the ground itself. The monks interpreted it as a sign that the King of the World had spoken a symbolic event, they said, marking transitions in surface civilization. Roerich later wrote that he felt, "The earth breathed beneath my feet." In 1930, the French esotericist René Guénon published Le Roi du Monde, the King of the World, expanding upon Ossendowski's report. He interpreted the monarch as the guardian of sacred tradition, linking him to ancient priest-kings from Sumer, Egypt, and India. Guénon suggested that the king's dwelling, Agartha, was less a place than a state of being a refuge for eternal wisdom during times of ignorance. He proposed that all legends of hidden rulers, from Arthur in Avalon to Prester John in the East, were echoes of the same memory. a central intelligence once visible to humanity, now withdrawn. Some modern scholars see in this story the psychological pattern of humanity's search for guidance, a projection of order onto chaos. Others note its curious persistence across time. In Mongolian folklore, the king of the world is known as Jeza Khan, a divine ruler who defends both surface and underworld from corruption. In Chinese Taoist writings, a parallel figure appears as Huangdi, the Yellow Emperor, who rules from beneath the Kunlun Mountains. In Christian Apocrypha, echoes remain in the tale of Melchizedek, the priest-king who appears briefly to bless Abraham, then vanishes, described only as one who has neither beginning of days nor end of life. The myth's endurance suggests that it serves more than curiosity, it frames an idea of continuity. In every version, the king of the world is not new, but remembered. He emerges when humanity reaches a threshold, when the weight of its own noise obscures direction. His role is not intervention but presence, like gravity silent, unseen, but necessary for form. The surface world forgets him, but the myth insists he remains below, attending to the rhythm of civilizations as one tends a clock. There are modern claims of communication as well. In 1975, during a seismic survey near Mount Kailash, a team of Indian researchers recorded frequencies between 8 and 10 Hz, corresponding to the natural alpha rhythm of the human brain. The local monks, when shown the data, remarked that these vibrations were the heartbeat of Rigdon Djepo. No scientific explanation was offered beyond resonance from wind and rock, but the coincidence deepened the legend's calm authority. In esoteric circles of the early Cold War period, particularly in France and Argentina, rumors spread that certain political movements sought contact with the Agarthan ruler through meditation or psychic experiment. The intent was not conquest, but counsel a belief that in moments of global instability, ancient forces might offer silent correction. None of these efforts produced evidence, but the idea remained that the fate of nations might be quietly balanced by an unseen intelligence beneath the earth. In all traditions, the monarch of Agartha does not judge, command, or intervene, he observes. His rule is described as inward rather than outward, a reign through resonance. To those who study the myth, this is its quiet power. The suggestion that the earth itself is not merely alive, but conscious, guided by a principle of order too subtle to measure. The story endures in silence. Pilgrims still travel to the Himalayas, to Mount Kailash, to the Gobi, to the frozen poles places where the earth feels oldest. They bring no instruments, only the wish to stand still long enough to hear something older than themselves. Whether they call it vibration, balance, or the king of the world, what they listen for is the same. The pulse of an ancient governance still working beneath the noise of history. The pathways beneath the continents. In 1948, during a survey of the Andes near Cusco, a Peruvian engineer named Juan Morich claimed to have entered a tunnel that descended for miles. He described smooth stone walls, carved at precise right angles, and inscriptions resembling Sanskrit more than any Andean script. He said the passages extended from Ecuador to Peru, possibly connecting even to the Amazon basin. Local legends already spoke of these tunnels as Chincana's labyrinths built by those who went below after a time of fire. Moritz's discovery would later inspire Erich von Däniken's 1973 book, The Gold of the Gods, which presented the tunnels as remnants of a global subterranean network. Archaeologists dismissed the claims, yet maps of Cuzco still mark sealed entrances said to lead downward from the old Inca capital. In the quiet study of ancient geography, such accounts form a pattern, from Cappadocia to Tibet, from the Gobi Desert to the Pyrenees. The earth holds evidence of vast underground structures carved long before written history. The question has never been whether tunnels exist, they do, but how extensive they are, and who first made them. In 1963, Turkish villagers near Nevşehir uncovered an opening while repairing a wall. It led to Derinkuyu, a city beneath the earth, descending more than 250 feet and containing living quarters, chapels, wells, and ventilation shafts. It could have sheltered 20,000 people. Archaeologists dated its origins to around 800 BCE, but the level of engineering suggested a longer lineage. Other nearby sites, connected by narrow tunnels, formed an entire underground province. Such complexes have parallels across continents. In China's Shanxi province, thousands of artificial caves line the cliffs along the Loess Plateau. Some are still inhabited, their interiors dry and warm year-round. In Scotland, souterrains' ancient underground passages have been found near Iron Age settlements. Their purpose remains uncertain. In North America, the Hopi people tell of the Sipapuni, the sacred opening from which their ancestors emerged after a catastrophe that destroyed the previous world. The opening is not a metaphor to them, but a physical place in the Grand Canyon, said to lead into a system of caverns that breathe. The idea of interconnected passageways spanning continents is not a modern invention. In 1648, Athanasius Kircher, a Jesuit scholar, published Mundus Subterraneus, one of the first scientific works to propose that the Earth contained internal channels through which oceans and fires circulated. His maps, drawn with careful ink lines, showed veins of water and magma linking distant regions and anatomy of the planet. Later, mystics interpreted these drawings as literal tunnels, arteries of an inner civilization that mirrored the body of the world. In Tibetan and Mongolian traditions, the Himalayas are said to contain entrances to the inner world. The Mount Kailash region, known as the navel of the earth, is believed to conceal passages leading to Agartha. Pilgrims describe caves with doors sealed by unknown metal, smooth to the touch and resistant to tools. Lamas tell that such gates open only by vibration, not force that their locks are sound. In 1926, Nicholas Roerich recorded in his expedition journal an encounter with a monk who pointed to a barren slope and said, "Below this mountain runs the road to Shambhala. None can walk it without being called." Modern mapping technology has revealed large cavities beneath mountain ranges, including vast limestone systems under the Himalayas and Central Asia. While geologists attribute them to erosion and tectonic folding, their scale invites imagination. Some extend for miles, their walls polished by underground rivers. Others end abruptly in chambers that appear carved. Explorers have reported inscriptions, symbols, and megalithic doorframes half buried in sediment. Most remain inaccessible due to instability or official restriction. The polar regions hold their own mysteries. Beneath the Arctic permafrost, sonar imaging during the 1,970 seconds revealed large voids natural, perhaps, yet too symmetrical to dismiss. In Antarctica, under the Queen Maudland ice sheet, radar detected subglacial caves warmed by geothermal activity. NASA surveys in 2018 confirmed these hollow domes could sustain temperatures above freezing, creating enclosed ecosystems unseen by the surface world. To those who study the legend of Agartha, these sites resemble gateways, arteries of the hidden realm described in ancient texts. In the Andes, a Chilean geologist named Antonio Mina once noted that seismic readings showed inexplicable echoes, as if sound waves were bouncing through empty corridors beneath the crust. He wrote, "It is as though the earth is hollowed like coral, filled with resonant spaces no man has measured." In 1954, a French explorer named Robert Charroux proposed that these pathways were once used by a pre-human race to travel safely during global cataclysms. His theory, though unprovable, was based on the recurring global alignment of tunnel myths, from the path of the serpent in Mesoamerica to the road of the Nagas in India to the way of the snakes in Africa. Each described a descent into the earth that ended not in darkness, but in light. In recent decades, ground-penetrating radar and satellite tomography have added precision to speculation. Beneath the pyramids of Giza, scans revealed cavities arranged in geometric patterns. Beneath the Yucatan Peninsula, divers have mapped the world's largest underwater cave systems, some connecting temples and cenotes once used for ritual descent. In Cappadocia, new tunnels continue to appear beneath modern homes, their floors collapsing into deeper unknowns. Every year, new openings remind the world that its crust is far from solid. Geologists describe these formations as coincidence lava tubes, water erosion, limestone dissolution. Yet the recurrence of human structures integrated within them remains unexplained. Smooth arches, carved stairways, and walls aligned with magnetic north appear too deliberate for accident. To those who study the Agarthan myth, such alignments are not random, they are remnants of an ancient network that once linked sacred sites across continents, like capillaries connecting organs within a living body. There are no confirmed maps of these tunnels, only fragments, drawings copied from memory, and coordinates whispered through archives. One such document, known as the Chart of the Inner Routes, appeared briefly in France in 1927 before vanishing from public record. It depicted a central hub beneath the Himalayas, with radial lines reaching toward Egypt, the Andes, and the Arctic. The legend beneath it bore a single inscription, Via Lucis, the way of light. Whether symbolic or literal, these pathways continue to fascinate because they speak to something deeper than exploration. They suggest that beneath every civilization runs another layer, a record not of conquest, but of retreat places, built to survive the silence of ages. When we look at mountains, deserts, or seas, we see their surfaces, but beneath them, the planet remembers its own architecture, the slow breathing of passages carved before history began, the messengers from below. In the spring of 1947, a Chilean shepherd named José Rojas claimed that 3 strangers appeared near the Atacama Plateau. They were tall, pale, and spoke Spanish with an unfamiliar rhythm. Rojas said they wore long grey garments that shimmered faintly in the morning light. They asked only for salt. When he pointed them towards the village, they declined and walked toward the mountains instead, vanishing into a fissure between 2 cliffs. A week later, Rojas returned to the spot and found nothing, only a faint warmth rising from the rocks. When the story reached Santiago, a geologist dispatched to the area found evidence of a cave system with air currents that smelled faintly of minerals, like stone still cooling from heat. Such stories form part of a quiet thread that has wound through human history. Encounters with those said to come from below. In the calm tone of ancient writings, the record is strangely consistent. The Mahabharata, written thousands of years ago in India, tells of serpent-like beings, the Nagas, who lived beneath the earth in radiant palaces and sometimes visited the surface to teach or to warn. In Tibet, there are stories of monks who spoke with luminous men emerging from mountain caves after long meditation, calling them the silent ones of the inner world. In medieval Europe, miners told of tall figures appearing in the deep tunnels of Bohemia, warning them of collapses moments before they occurred. The miners called them kobolds, not devils, but watchers. During the late 19th century, reports of similar encounters began to take a more modern form. In 1895, near Mount Shasta in Northern California, a prospector named J.C. Brown claimed he discovered a tunnel leading deep into the mountain. Inside, he said, were rooms lined with copper, murals depicting a civilization that predated known history, and mummified beings over 7 feet tall. Brown later vanished before leading others to the site. His account would later evolve into the legend of the Lemurians of Mount Shasta, said to be descendants of an ancient race who took refuge below ground when their continent sank. Local tribes, long before these stories, had spoken of people of the light, who sometimes came to the surface through the mountain springs, bringing gifts of stone and vanishing with the dawn. In 1934, a British explorer named George Hunt Williamson reported a meeting near Lhasa with monks who spoke of emissaries from Shambhala. They described them as tall, calm beings who could travel unseen, appearing only to those who did not fear silence. Williamson later wrote that their presence was like a vibration, not an apparition. Similar reports emerged from South America, where Quechua elders told of teachers arriving from the mountains, speaking a language no one remembered, but everyone understood. The details vary, but the tone of each account remains curiously restrained. There is no spectacle, no miracle, only brief, quiet exchanges and a return to absence. The most detailed modern claim came from Admiral Richard E. Byrd's alleged private diary, first mentioned in the 1,950 seconds. It describes a flight over the North Pole in which Byrd recorded entering a lush inner land and being guided to a city of light. He claimed to have met a leader who warned humanity against atomic destruction, calling himself the guardian of the inner world. The authenticity of this diary has never been proven and is generally regarded as a fabrication, but the story aligns closely with older traditions beings emerging from below to warn of imbalance above. In 1962, during Cold War operations under the Arctic ice, a Soviet submersible recorded what the crew described as fast-moving shadows at depths beyond 400 meters. They were dismissed as sonar artifacts. Yet the commander, Yuri Andreev, wrote in his log that he heard a hum followed by a series of 3 clear tones. Similar sounds had been noted years earlier by Norwegian researchers during polar aurora studies. In both cases, the tones resembled a sequence used in shortwave transmissions, a pattern not natural but deliberate. Modern scientists treat such claims with caution, often categorizing them as psychological phenomena shaped by isolation, low oxygen, or electromagnetic interference. Yet even under scrutiny, the myth persists because it is not built on proof, but on pattern. Across centuries, continents, and languages, the description of these messengers remains almost identical. They emerge silently, they bring no harm, and they speak of balance. In almost every account, they withdraw when violence approaches. In the archives of the Roerich Museum in New York, a note written by Nicholas Roerich in 1930 describes a brief exchange in Mongolia. A stranger arrived at the expedition camp, dressed in local robes, but with features that seemed neither Eastern nor Western. He spoke in a low voice, saying only, "The time of the surface races is fast." When asked what he meant, he smiled and replied, "The circle closes from within." He left before dawn. Roerich's assistants could not trace where he had gone. The sand around the camp bore no footprints. In other traditions, such figures are not visitors but reminders. The Hopi elders speak of the ant people beings who sheltered humans underground during the Great Fire that destroyed the First World. When the surface cooled, they returned humanity to the sun and retreated once more. Their drawings show elongated forms with large eyes, standing beneath domed roofs lined with dots of light. In Siberia, Yakut folklore mentions the Chud, pale people who lived under the hills and would sometimes trade with villagers at night, leaving polished stones and vanishing when seen. As the 20th century gave way to the 21st, stories of underground beings adapted to modern mediums. Reports appeared on radio, then the internet pilots describing lights moving beneath thin ice in Greenland, miners hearing voices calling their names when no one was near, researchers in Antarctica observing columns of light rising from crevasses before vanishing into storm clouds. No single claim stands apart as evidence, yet together they form a quiet map of persistence, a pattern of sightings that moves not toward revelation, but toward endurance. Whether interpreted as myth, misperception, or metaphor, the consistency of tone remains the same: calm, emotionless, without demand. Those who say they met the messengers describe no threats, no salvation, only a strange neutrality, as if these beings existed outside urgency. In one recorded case from 1979, an Argentine prospector said of the figure he met, "He looked like us, but his eyes had no weight." In the calm rhythm of myth, the message they bring never changes. The earth is older than we believe. Its heart is alive, and it watches. When surface life forgets its rhythm, the messengers appear not to punish, but to remind. Then they return below, leaving only the silence of stone and the echo of their passing. The technology of the hidden Sunday. In 1906, a Norwegian sailor named Olaf Jansen told a story that few believed. He claimed to have sailed north of the Arctic Circle with his father, through thick fog and changing winds, until they entered a vast sea where the sky glowed with steady light. The warmth increased as they moved forward. The water turned calm. Days passed without darkness. Jansen said they had found an inner world, illuminated not by the sun above, but by another sun, smaller, softer, and suspended at the center of the planet itself. He called it the smoky god, after the hazy radiance that seemed to fill every horizon. His account was published years later in a small book, The Smoky God, A Voyage to the Inner World. It was dismissed as fiction, yet even now it remains one of the most detailed descriptions of the so-called hidden sun. The image of an inner sun is older than Jansen's story. In Hindu cosmology, the world beneath is said to be illuminated by Aditya, the subterranean light of the serpent realm. Tibetan texts describe a soft radiance emanating from the heart of the earth, a sphere of life energy that sustains all layers of existence. Ancient Greek philosophers hinted at a similar idea. Pythagoras, writing in the 6th century BCE, spoke of a counter-earth that mirrored the world we see, balanced by a fire at the center of all things. Even the Roman naturalist Pliny recorded travellers' tales of glowing caverns deep within the mountains, where daylight never reached, but vision never failed. In the 17th century, when scientific instruments began to measure the planet's magnetism, new interpretations appeared. The English astronomer Edmund Halley proposed that the Earth might consist of concentric shells, each with its own magnetic field and atmosphere. To explain the auroras, he suggested that luminous gases escaped from openings at the poles, light from the interior sun leaking through. In his 1692 paper to the Royal Society, he wrote that these emissions could account for the shining arches seen in polar skies. His theory was cautious but sincere, grounded in observation, not myth. For centuries afterward, his idea of an inner luminary remained a quiet footnote in scientific literature. In the early 20th century, Marshall B. Gardner revived Halley's model in his book A Journey to the Earth's Interior. Gardner proposed that sunlight refracted through polar openings would curve inward, illuminating the interior world without night. He calculated that such a sphere, roughly 600 miles across, could hang at the planet's center by gravitational balance. His diagrams showed a miniature sun surrounded by an inner atmosphere. Critics dismissed his mathematics, yet the book attracted attention among early aviators and Arctic explorers who had seen optical anomalies near the poles, false dawns, luminous fogs, and horizons that glowed long after sunset. Some explorers interpreted these lights as reflections of polar ice. Others were less certain. Fridtjof Nansen, the Norwegian Arctic pioneer, noted in his 1897 journal Farthest North that he often saw a diffused daylight, even when the sun was well below the horizon. He described an odd warmth in the air and wrote that it is as though the earth herself gives light. He did not mention Agartha, but his words later appeared in compilations of hollow earth research, presented as inadvertent evidence of the hidden sun's glow. In the 1930 seconds, radio experiments added another layer to the mystery. Scientists discovered that certain low-frequency signals bounced back from the Earth's interior at greater depths than expected, as if the planet contained reflective layers or cavities. Physicist Maurice Allais noted unexplained deviations in pendulum motion during solar eclipses, speculating that gravitational interference might come from a secondary radiant body within Earth's core. Though modern geophysics attributes such anomalies to density variations in molten iron, the notion of an internal light persisted in esoteric literature. Theosophical texts gave it new symbolism. Helena Blavatsky described the central spiritual sun as a source of consciousness, mirrored in both the cosmos and the human heart. To her followers, the inner sun of Agartha was not a physical star, but the hidden energy of creation, what Sanskrit scriptures called prana, the life breath of worlds. Later mystics equated this with the planet's magnetic field, a living current that circulates through stone and water like blood. The faint hum recorded by scientists in seismic data became, in their eyes, the Earth's own heartbeat, pulsing to the rhythm of that unseen light. In 1957, during International Geophysical Year, the Soviet Union conducted deep drilling in Siberia to study geothermal energy. Instruments detected heat far higher than expected at shallow depths, suggesting unknown processes within the crust. The data hinted that certain regions were hotter than others, possibly due to radioactive decay or pockets of trapped plasma. Some independent researchers reinterpreted this as scientific evidence of the inner sun's energy leaking upward through fractures. Official reports made no such claim, but the numbers circulated among fringe physicists and mystics alike. Later, in 1979, NASA's Pioneer Venus mission measured a faint, continuous electromagnetic resonance surrounding the Earth, now known as the Schumann resonance. Its frequency, around 7.83 Hz, matched the average rhythm of the human brain's alpha waves. To those drawn to the idea of planetary consciousness, the coincidence seemed meaningful. The body of Earth and the body of man resonating with the same pulse, both energized by the same hidden source. Modern geology paints a different picture. Beneath the crust lies the mantle, a mass of molten rock surrounding a metallic core. The outer core moves slowly, generating the magnetic field that shields life from cosmic radiation. The inner core, though solid, may rotate slightly faster than the rest of the planet. At its center, temperatures exceed 6,000 degrees Celsius hotter than the surface of the sun. Yet, to those who read myth as memory, this scientific description only refines the legend. They see in it not contradiction, but transformation. The hidden sun as a symbolic truth rendered in physics the fiery heart of the world, radiant and eternal. In caves across the world, explorers sometimes encounter phenomena that blur the line between science and story. Deep within Mexico's Nika mine, crystals larger than houses shimmer in humid darkness, refracting torchlight into a milky glow. At those depths, the air itself appears luminous, heated by unseen forces. Photographs of the mine evoke the same imagery found in Agarthan myth pillars of translucent light, stillness, and breath. Nature, in its own silence, seems to remember the form described in ancient texts, a light not of the sky, but of the earth itself. Whether the inner sun is interpreted as plasma, consciousness, or metaphor, its role in the Agarthan myth remains constant. It is the source of life beneath the surface, the pulse that sustains hidden civilizations. It needs no fuel, no dawn or dusk, only balance. In the calm rhythm of the legend, it is said that when the surface world forgets its harmony, the inner sun dims. When balance returns, it brightens again, invisible to us, but essential to all. The idea endures because it speaks quietly to something recognizable, the wish that even in darkness, there is light. Beneath the continents and the centuries, the Earth holds that possibility within itself, a radiant core that neither burns nor blinds, a warmth that belongs to the planet alone. The archives of the Inner Kingdom. In 1926, during his expedition across Central Asia, Nicholas Roerich wrote in his journal that monks in a remote Tibetan monastery spoke of libraries beneath the sand. They described chambers deep within the earth containing luminous tablets and crystal spheres that stored the voices of the first civilizations. The monks said these were not written in ink or carved by hand, but encoded through vibration, preserved in stone that could remember. Roerich called this place the Archives of Shambhala. To them, it was not legend, but geography, a continuation of memory beneath the crust, guarded until the surface became quiet again. The idea of hidden archives recurs across ancient cultures. In Mesopotamia, the Sumerians spoke of tablets of destinies, indestructible records kept by the gods beneath the Absu, the underground sea. In Egypt, priests of Heliopolis told of the Hall of Records buried near the Sphinx, containing the knowledge of a vanished age before the Nile. Greek philosophers like Plato mentioned books of Atlantis, texts of mathematics, astronomy, and ethics hidden before the deluge that ended their world. In Hindu cosmology, the concept of Akashic or Akashic records suggests a universal archive, not physical but energetic, storing every thought and action. In all of these traditions, knowledge does not vanish, it descends. When Ferdinand Ossendowski published Beasts, Men, and Gods in 1922, he included a passage describing the king of the world descending into a great hall of glowing archives where the history of Earth was kept. The books there, he wrote, shine like silver and hum faintly as if alive. He described symbols moving across their surfaces as though the material itself was aware. He did not claim to have seen it, only that he heard the story from lamas, who spoke of it with such calm certainty that disbelief felt unnecessary. The earth, they said, remembers for those who forget. Throughout the 20th century, scattered accounts continued. A Chilean archaeologist named Manuel Rojas reported that in 1939, deep in the caves near the Atacama Desert, he found long corridors whose walls contained reliefs not carved but fused, as if stone had melted to form images. The figures depicted star maps and geometric patterns that did not match local iconography. When Rojas returned months later, the entrance had collapsed in an earthquake, and his photographs, according to his daughter, were confiscated by officials who labelled them optical errors. In the 1950 seconds, the American mystic Edgar Cayce spoke often of subterranean halls of record beneath both Egypt and the Yucatan. He described them as sealed until humanity reached spiritual maturity. His descriptions included crystalline cylinders capable of storing light, something modern physicists would later explore through the study of optical data storage and quartz memory. To those who follow the legend of Agartha, this technology is not new discovery, but rediscovery, echoes of the same principle used by the inner civilization to preserve knowledge without decay. Geological research occasionally reveals structures that seem to support, at least symbolically, these myths. In 2017, deep beneath the Gulf of Oman, scientists detected crystalline formations of unusual symmetry, honeycomb-like lattices, several meters wide, grown naturally under pressure and heat. Though purely mineral, their organization suggests that the Earth itself can encode pattern through mineral geometry. It is easy to imagine how ancient observers might have interpreted such formations as intelligent storage, the planet's own memory, inscribed in stone. Legends from India add more detail. The Agni Purana describes a city of knowledge beneath Mount Meru, where monks keep scrolls written in fire that never burn out. The text refers to writing without words. an expression scholars believe points to some form of energy transmission or symbolic telepathy. Tibetan oral tradition expands this further. The lamas of Agartha are said to preserve records not on material tablets, but through sound vibrations sustained within chambers of specific resonance. To the outsider, such halls might appear empty. Yet, when sound is introduced, chant, tone, or note, the room responds, producing voices, music, or histories as if the walls themselves remember. In 1968, an Italian speleological team exploring caves in southern Turkey reported an acoustic phenomenon. Certain chambers produced tones of exact harmonic frequency when spoken into. The echoes returned as chords, not single reflections. The researchers later discovered that the shapes of the walls matched the ratios of musical intervals. They called it architectural resonance, likely accidental. Others, studying Agarthan lore, interpreted it differently. Perhaps such chambers were designed to store sound itself, like natural phonographs written in stone. There are quieter references too. During the Second World War, several expeditions, some German, some Soviet, were rumoured to have sought archives in Tibet and the Arctic, hoping for ancient technology or knowledge of lost energy systems. Little remains documented beyond fragments of correspondence and the occasional rumour of sealed caves discovered and reburied. Yet these episodes reinforced the idea that knowledge worth guarding must be hidden deep, beneath not only rock but time. The concept of crystal records returned in modern science with surprising symmetry. In 2015, researchers at the University of Southampton developed quartz storage disks capable of holding 360 terabytes of data for billions of years. The medium they used, silica glass, was stable, transparent, and read by laser light. The process was called five-dimensional storage. The discovery was hailed as new, yet its principal light, as information embedded in crystal, was identical to what the Tibetan and Hindu texts had described centuries earlier. For believers in Agartha, this was coincidence only in name. They saw it as the first faint re-emergence of forgotten art. Every myth carries the same image: vast chambers, quiet, lit by internal glow, filled with structures that hum faintly when approached. Some say the archives stretch beneath the Himalayas, others claim branches under the Andes, the Ural Mountains, or the deserts of Egypt. Their contents are always described as pure knowledge, not history as we understand it, but something living, responsive, self-correcting, a wisdom that remembers the rise and fall of civilizations without judgment. The monks who told Roerich their story added one final detail. The archives, they said, are not sealed to protect themselves from humanity, they are sealed to protect humanity from them. To open them too early, they said, is to hand a child a lightning bolt. The phrase stayed with him until his death. He later wrote, "Perhaps the earth guards its wisdom not with walls, but with silence. To those who listen for such silence, the myth endures not as fantasy, but as reassurance. Beneath the continents, beneath the centuries, the earth may still keep its own record, a memory written not in books, but in the quiet persistence of stone, vibration, and light." The Gateways of Stone. In 1938, a German expedition led by Ernst Schaefer travelled through Tibet under the pretext of zoological research. Among the reports later published, one brief note mentioned openings among the granite ridges west of Lhasa, sealed by carved slabs. The text did not elaborate. Years later, the account reappeared in archives, describing these as doorways to the inner world. To local monks, they were known simply as the doors of the watchers. They were not meant to be entered, only acknowledged. It is one of many references to gateways, silent, sealed thresholds said to connect the world above to Agartha below. Such gateways appear across continents. In Peru, near Lake Titicaca, stands the Puerta de Hayumaca, a monolithic doorway carved into red sandstone. It leads nowhere, just a shallow recess framed by smooth columns. Yet local Aymara people call it the Gate of the Gods, where, according to legend, ancient priests entered the earth with a golden disc that emitted light. Archaeologists date the carving to thousands of years before the Inca Empire. It is not a tomb nor a temple entrance. Its surface is unweathered, as though it has waited untouched for centuries. Far to the north, in Egypt, early explorers of the Giza Plateau reported sealed shafts beneath the Great Pyramid. In 1837, Colonel Howard Vyse discovered narrow passages blocked by limestone plugs leading deeper than the burial chambers. He noted them in his log, but further excavations stopped when the tunnels grew unstable. Modern radar surveys in 1993 confirmed the existence of additional voids beneath the pyramid, some aligned directly with celestial constellations. These have never been opened. To adherents of Agarthan lore, these voids are not tombs, they are gates, parts of a planetary system of entry points leading to the world beneath. In Turkey's Cappadocia region, where entire underground cities lie buried, entrances often appear in plain sight small, circular stones that roll into place like doors. Each can only be opened from within. When explorers descend into the narrow tunnels, they often find them ending in long shafts, their lower openings filled with compacted earth or concrete. Locals say that during ancient times, those who entered below sealed their own way shut, waiting for a signal that never came. The Himalayas hold the most enduring stories of all. Pilgrims traveling around Mount Kailash speak of caves that emit warm air, even in winter, their walls carved smooth, as if by machines. The entrances often collapse after earthquakes, as though the mountain reclaims them. The Mahabharata mentions a place called the Path of the Gods, leading into the heart of the earth near Meru, guarded by silence and darkness. In later Tibetan accounts, this became one of the 7 great gates to Agartha. Each was said to be aligned to specific star positions, opening only when the heavens mirrored the geometry below. In 1904, the French archaeologist Louis Jacoliot compiled reports of stone portals in India, described in Sanskrit texts as Svarga Dwara's doors of heaven. He suggested that these referred to ancient machines, mechanisms of unknown power capable of generating intense light. The same word appears in later Vedic commentaries referring to Meru Yantras, instruments built by gods to travel between realms. To scholars, these are myths of spiritual ascent. To those tracing Agarthan geography, they are literal instructions. A pattern emerges across the globe, a ring of sites forming what some researchers call the subterranean axis. Mount Kailash, the Giza Plateau, Lake Titicaca, Antarctica, and the Arctic Circle each correspond to ancient references of hidden entrances. Even the Mayan city of Palenque, with its stepped temples and underground channels, was said to represent the descent into Xibalba, the underworld of the gods. In every culture, the entrance to knowledge lies below. During the 1,940 seconds, rumors spread of military expeditions sent to the poles to locate physical openings. None were verified, but satellite images decades later showed circular anomalies at both poles regions still obscured or restricted in official data. In 1965, U.S. geophysicist Raymond Bernard published The Hollow Earth, citing these anomalies as evidence of polar gateways. He wrote calmly, without sensationalism, "Every civilization leaves a door open for return. The Earth, being alive, could do no less." Modern geology, while rejecting a hollow Earth, still uncovers features that echo these legends. Beneath Antarctica's Queen Maud Land, radar mapping has revealed subglacial caverns large enough to contain entire cities. Volcanic heat from below keeps them at temperatures suitable for microbial life. Scientists enter through ice tunnels that descend hundreds of meters, lit only by headlamps, their breath forming clouds in the still air. Many describe the silence as total sound, absorbed rather than echoed, as if the ice itself listens. Elsewhere, in South America, a cave system known as Cueva de los Tallos in Ecuador gained fame after Neil Armstrong joined an expedition there in 1976. The mission found deep chambers lined with reflective mineral surfaces and geometric shapes that seemed unnatural. While no artifacts were recovered, Armstrong later described the experience as descending through the memory of the Earth. To those who follow Agarthan theory, that phrase became symbolic, an acknowledgement that the gateways are not only physical but psychological thresholds between layers of perception. In Australia, Aboriginal legends speak of Turinga stones, sacred markers identifying entrances to the underworld. These stones, oval and engraved with spirals, are buried near caves that radiate warmth. Elders say the stones sleep, and that disturbing them releases voices. The same spiral symbols appear in petroglyphs across South America, Asia, and the Mediterranean. Some researchers believe they represent energy or sound, others the motion of descent. In Agarthan tradition, the spiral is the mark of the gateway. It indicates that the path does not go straight down, but inward, coiling toward the planet's heart. No modern explorer claims to have entered these gateways and returned. The myths caution that they open only under certain conditions, harmonic frequencies, planetary alignments, or states of consciousness. Tibetan texts describe monks who meditated near these entrances for months until they saw light emerging from the rock. They did not follow it. The gates, one text says, are not for feet but for awareness. Across centuries, the locations remain constant, yet their meaning shifts. To the scientist, they are geological anomalies. To the archaeologist, ritual symbols. To the believer, entrances to continuity. In every interpretation, the gateways serve the same purpose. They remind us that the world has depth, that beneath our mapped terrain lies something older than measurement, sealed not only by stone, but by silence. Every gate, whether carved, collapsed, or imagined, faces the same direction, inward. They are not invitations to travel, but to listen to the hum beneath the crust, to the warmth under ice, to the faint suggestion that the earth is not solid but layered with memory. And, if Agartha truly exists, its first threshold is not at the poles or beneath the mountains. It begins, as all gateways do, with stillness, the world within time. In 1932, a Tibetan monk named Dorje Lingpa told a visiting scholar from Calcutta that below the crust, time does not pass as it does here. The scholar recorded the statement in his notebook, uncertain whether it was metaphor or cosmology. The monk spoke calmly, saying that the inhabitants of Agartha lived according to a different rhythm, not bound to sunrise or sunset. They measure not days, he said, but changes in thought. It was one of the first modern references to a temporal divide, a theme that appears again and again in the world's oldest myths, that beneath the surface, time is slow, circular, and patient. In Hindu cosmology, this idea takes clear form. The Mahabharata tells of King Kakudmi, who visited the realm of Brahma only to return and find that many ages had passed on earth. The gods told him that time flows differently across planes of existence, faster above, slower below. The text describes the underworlds, or Patala Lokas, as places where life unfolds at another pace, where years are like breaths. Similarly, in Buddhist Kalachakra teachings, Shambhala, often equated with Agartha, is described as existing within but beyond, a domain governed by cycles invisible to surface life. Those who enter it experience not minutes or years, but a continuity unbroken by decay. Western literature echoes the same structure. In Norse myth, the hidden world beneath Yggdrasil is not subject to ordinary seasons. The dwarves who live there craft weapons and art in unending twilight, untouched by aging. Celtic stories tell of Tir na Nog, the land of youth, where time stands still. Those who return to the surface find centuries have passed in their absence. These parallels, separated by oceans and millennia, share a quiet logic. The deeper one goes beneath the surface, the slower the world becomes. In scientific terms, this notion finds faint reflection in Einstein's theory of relativity. Clocks run slower in stronger gravitational fields. Deep beneath the Earth, where gravity is fractionally greater, time indeed passes differently, though by milliseconds, not centuries. Yet myth exaggerates what physics whispers. Where the scientist speaks of seconds, the legend speaks of ages. To the ancients, the center of the world was not only spatially hidden, but temporally detached, a place where the unfolding of history paused, storing memory like amber. In 1908, Russian mystic Nikolai Notovich claimed to have heard of travelers who entered the world within through mountain paths and returned generations later, unchanged in appearance. The monks who told him this said simply, "They live where years have no edge." Later, when explorers such as Nicholas Roerich questioned the same monasteries, they received nearly identical answers. The pattern remained consistent. Time within Agartha flows by consciousness, not by stars. Even modern accounts, though written in cautious language, suggest anomalies of duration. Olaf Jansen, the Norwegian sailor who claimed to have seen the inner sun, said he and his father spent 2 years within the inner world, though to them it felt like only a few weeks. When they returned through the polar sea, their ship was destroyed in a storm. Jansen was rescued, but he found that 3 decades had passed since their departure. Critics dismiss the story, yet the detail fits an ancient motif that passage into the earth alters one's relationship to time. The Tibetan Book of Jayan, often cited by theosophists, describes the sons of the fire mist, beings from the inner world who age as the world dreams, not as it wakes. The phrase suggests a civilization whose perception of time is neither linear nor bound to motion, but to awareness itself. This aligns with certain scientific observations. Deep in the ocean's pressure, or under polar ice, processes slow. Chemical reactions, biological cycles, and decay nearly cease. In such conditions, a world could exist where centuries unfold with the stillness of an hour. During the 1,950 seconds, Soviet geophysicists conducting long-term experiments in Arctic mines noted that clocks kept underground showed subtle discrepancies compared to those on the surface. They attributed this to humidity and magnetism. Still, one researcher, Ivan Petrovich, wrote privately that he felt a distortion of sequence, as if time itself wavered between moments. His colleagues dismissed it as exhaustion. The report was never published, but fragments appeared later in a Moscow archive labeled Psychophysical Effects of Subterranean Labor. In mythic language, these distortions become the foundation of prophecy. The king of the world, according to Ossendowski's lamas, sees across centuries because he does not live within their flow. From Agartha, he observes surface history as if reading a book whose pages turn slowly. Each event, war, discovery, collapse, appears to him as one motion. The surface races, by contrast, live too quickly to notice the pattern. The legend implies that time's uneven rhythm explains why hidden civilizations remain invisible. They simply exist on another beat. Some interpret this difference not as physical, but perceptual. Theosophists like René Guénon wrote that the inner world operates on sacred time, the rhythm of initiation rather than the ticking of clocks. Those who descend symbolically through meditation or ritual enter this timeless state, reconnecting with the memory of ages. Modern physics, with its quantum paradoxes, offers an unexpected echo. At the subatomic level, Time behaves irregularly, events can occur without clear sequence, causes can follow effects. In this sense, the world within time may not be beneath us, but within the structure of matter itself. There are also quieter analogies. In 1964, divers exploring Mexico's Cenote Angelita described descending through layers of water separated by hydrogen sulfide clouds. Light dimmed, sound slowed, and motion felt suspended. It was like falling through centuries, one diver said. Such moments hint at why the myth endures. It captures an intuitive truth. That depth changes perception. That stillness elongates experience. The oldest depiction of this idea appears on Babylonian boundary stones showing spirals descending into the earth, each ring marked with stars. Scholars interpret these as symbols of time, each deeper ring representing slower flow. The final center, unlabeled, was called Kishar, the foundation. In later mystic traditions, this center becomes Agartha itself, the still point where all motion ends. To the rational mind, these are metaphors. To the believer, they describe geography as real as mountains. Both interpretations share a quiet understanding. Time, like space, has layers. At the surface, it races. Within, it slows. At the core, it sleeps. The inhabitants of Agartha, if they exist, live not in secrecy, but in another rhythm, entirely, where the present never fades, and the past has not yet ended. And so, the myth persists. When the world above shifts too quickly for memory to keep pace, people imagine a slower realm that remembers what haste forgets. The world within time offers that reassurance, that beneath progress and loss, there remains a stillness unbroken, a heartbeat that measures not seconds, but ages of the earth itself, the stillness beneath all things. Across centuries, explorers have searched for the entrances. Monks have whispered of light beneath the mountains, sailors of warmth beyond the ice, scientists of magnetic whispers within the crust. Yet all of them, whether with compasses or prayers, end in the same realization that the mystery of Agartha is not a place, but a silence. Every map, every myth, every rumor of tunnels or inner suns folds into this one idea. That beneath the movement of history, beneath continents and wars, the earth itself keeps a kind of stillness, patient and aware. In the archives of forgotten expeditions, there are patterns that do not change. A compass that turns slightly off true north, then returns. A photograph that shows faint light where no light should be. The hum of seismic instruments that never stops, though earthquakes have ceased. In 2013, geophysicists studying this persistent vibration, the planet's own background tone, called it the Earth's free oscillation. It has no origin, it simply is. It continues through every moment, through wind, ocean, and stone. The frequency is steady, deep, and unbroken. Some called it coincidence, others called it breath. Those who wrote of Agartha heard that breath long before instruments did. To the monks of Shambhala, it was the sound of balance, the pulse of the hidden sun. To the miners of Bohemia, it was the voice of the kobolds. To the explorers who reached the poles and heard strange air moving beneath the ice, it was proof that something lived within the planet. To modern scientists, it is the result of waves striking the seafloor, a natural resonance. Between these explanations lies a quiet truth. All agree that the earth hums. The legend endures because it speaks to something older than proof, the human need to believe that wisdom is preserved somewhere beyond reach. The thought that beneath extinction, beneath collapse, beneath the noise of centuries, there remains an intelligence still awake. It may not be a city of gold or crystal archives, but a memory written into geology itself, a record of order that time cannot erase. Some scientists now speak of the crust as a dynamic system of feedback loops, capable of self-regulation. The mystics said the same in another language, that the earth watches itself, corrects itself, and keeps its heart protected. In the calm narratives of explorers like Nicholas Roerich or the secretive papers of Admiral Byrd, the tone is always the same: no excitement, no discovery, only description. Each reports warmth where there should be cold, light where there should be none, guidance where direction is lost. These consistencies, though scientifically disputed, form the emotional core of the legend. That the deeper one goes into the world, the less hostile it becomes. That wisdom retreats downward, not upward. That civilization, when it collapses, does not vanish, it burrows, waiting for the surface to quiet. In one preserved passage from a Tibetan scroll, the king of the world speaks to his disciple. When men forget how to listen, the earth hides her voice. When they remember, she returns it through stone. The words are neither prophecy nor warning. They describe a cycle. Every age grows loud, then silent again. The hidden kingdom exists in that interval between noise and stillness, like breath held between heartbeats. Modern instruments measure this rhythm differently: tectonic drift, core rotation, seismic lull. Yet even stripped of myth, the image remains unchanged. Inside the planet lies heat, movement, and sound beyond human range. Every earthquake is its whisper. Every ocean current is its motion. The inner world may not house cities or kings, but it holds continuity, the same flow that carries mountains upward and draws them down again. To the mystic, that motion is consciousness. To the scientist, it is physics. Both are ways of naming the same persistence. When explorers descend into deep caves, they often describe the moment when all echoes fade. At that depth, sound no longer returns. Breath and heartbeat become the only measure of existence. Some say that in this silence they feel watched not by presence, but by attention itself, as though the rock remembers. It is perhaps there, in that sensation, that Agartha truly exists, not as distance or depth, but as recognition, the realization that the earth beneath us is not dead matter, but a living archive of everything that has ever touched it. The oldest stories say that when the surface world reaches the end of one cycle, the gates of Agartha will open and its people will return. Perhaps that was never meant to mean emergence from tunnels or caverns. Perhaps it means that humanity, when it finally grows quiet again, will hear what has always been speaking beneath its feet, the planet's unending memory, the light that burns without flame, the steady hum that connects every mountain and ocean into one vast heartbeat. In the end, the search for Agartha becomes indistinguishable from the search for stillness. Every compass, every myth, every map pointing downward leads to the same conclusion, that the hidden world is not elsewhere but here, beneath every step, within every silence, measured not in miles, but in moments of listening. And so the legend closes, without ending. The earth continues to hum. The light within remains unseen, but unextinguished. And somewhere below the noise of civilization, the stillness beneath all things endures unchanged, waiting and await. The story of Agartha may never be proven, yet it lingers quietly, patiently, like the pulse of the planet itself. Beneath the continents, beneath our footsteps, something continues to move, to breathe, to remember. Perhaps the inner world was never meant to be discovered, only understood. Its legends remind us that wisdom often hides in silence, and that every mystery we seek below the earth begins, in truth, within ourselves. If you felt that stillness, if the thought of a hidden civilization beneath the surface makes you wonder what else we've forgotten, stay with us. There are countless more worlds waiting in the quiet corners of history, where fact and myth share the same breath. Subscribe, and let your next journey begin where the last one ends, in the space between science and story, between sound and silence, deep beneath the surface of what we call Earth.